Welcome everyone back to Poppy and All's channel. Hope we're all doing really well. If you're new around here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe. It really does help the channel out. And we're really knee-deep, not just in man flu, which I've got at the moment, but we're knee-deep in trade rumours. And what I wanted to do this year is really assess the trade rumours and kind of be pragmatic. I think sometimes that when we look at trade rumours, we get a little bit too attached to the players. And my whole shtick is just because I come from the Rambo, you can never get attached to anyone because everyone is disposable. So it's always good to take the emotion out of it and then let's look at the crux of the matter and let's look at what it is. So for this one, I wanted to do something that's kind of close to my heart, and that is look at the Harry McKay and the Christian Petracca ones. So I want to put a caveat before you get in the comments and go, you can't do it, right? I want you to see I am totally impartial on this. I just want to run some cold hard facts, look at it objectively so we can try and be a list manager and separate the emotion and think about practicality. So let's look at it. So firstly, I think the first part of when you're trying to look at anything is if you're selling something, you've got to look at the replaceability factor. So Harry McKay is in the top 10 ranked key forwards in the league. And what we've done is here, we've looked at real important metrics. So we've gone over the past 10 years. And for you to be a very good key forward, a good place to start is looking at the averages. So to be very good as a key forward, you've got to have marks inside 50s have got to be good. Goals per game have got to be good. Contested marks and your score involvements have got to be good. And when you look at the players that are in the list on the current AFL, just this year alone, there is 13 players that do that. And if you go back over the last 5 years of key forwards that fit into that category, you're looking at about 16 of them are currently on the list. So then what you do is you look at people who have been drafted in the top 20 in that time, right? So you've got 35. You've got 35. So your statistical probability is 16 by 35, which is about 46% chance of drafting this. There has to be a caveat here that genuinely these players hit this peak about 2 to 3 years. But there's also something that I want to call, and it's called imprintation learning. Imprintation learning. Now, if you've ever coached golf or tennis, a solo sport, this is quite poignant to you. If you're a parent, this is quite poignant to you. And subconsciously, people pick up traits of what they're around all the time. So, good example, my kids, one of them has this weird, uncanny ability to make stupid analogies up. I haven't taught him that. That has been an imprint learning from me. From a golf point of view, when I'm at the top of my backswing, I fan the club head to drop it into the slot. It's something that I learned when I was 7, 8 years old, when everyone said in to out swing. I found it easy to start the club on the outside and then drop in, which you might see from Sergio Garcia, Jim Furyk, things like that. It's kind of an imprint learning that I then pass on to my pupils. So when I coach my kids, when I coach under 13s particularly, it's really poignant because it's a leadership passed down thing. It kind of happens subconsciously because of the way I demonstrate. And you see a lot of people, you can actually tell, if you ever are in an environment where there's one-on-one coaching, you can see this. This works as well in the professional avenue. When I was a trainer for a big insurance company, I noticed some of the traits I had, but then some of the traits that the coaches had, some of the sales guys, would be imprinted subconsciously on other people. And you could actually see which salesperson was trained by which sales manager just by hanging around them. So what this also takes into account that you need decent key forwards. So Carlton are the exception to this rule. They drafted Harry McKay and Charlie Curnow, and they're one of 3 teams that features in this list that has 2 players in that mould. You've got West Coast Eagles, who have got Jake Waterman and Oscar Allen, right? And they're the perfect 1-2 combo. You've got Jake Waterman who's kicking the goals, and you've got Oscar Allen who's doing it. You've got Jeremy Cameron, and then if you go back through Korea, Tom Hawkins. When you look at how they've played together, one of them has become the daddy quite quickly, Jeremy Cameron. And then you look at the other team, and you've got a team by the name of the Doggies. They've got Sam Darcy and Jamara Ugur Koken. And it's quite impressive that the imprinting learning from here has been the addition for Jamara Ugur Koken's game on someone like Aaron Norton, who takes people to the goal square, and beats them up. You can see that imprint learning there. Great example of imprinting learning is Ben King and Max King, right? Max King has been learning off Tim Membry, right? And you can see that naturally he has started to ghost outside 50 and go looking for the ball, where Ben King's got Levi Casbolt and Sam Day, who is a very good footballer in his own right. You look at Sam Day when he plays, he's got certain methodologies to it. And Ben King is more deep, gets deep in the 50 and starts physicality and starts to make contacts early before he leads, where Max King avoids that contact. So you can see how that has naturally transited from when they were drafted. So that's a really important point. So we're looking at replaceability factor. If you use a consensus draft, which obviously AFL list managers are a little bit more complex, they're not thinking like that. They're going to make their own draft order in their mind. But genuinely speaking, 40%, as we said, is going to come from the draft, and you're going to do it. And if you've got a key forward there who is fairly good, your likelihood is quite high. So then we look at Melbourne. Have Melbourne got any key forwards in this ratio this year? No, they don't. And this is probably the one thing that's separating Melbourne big style, really, from the big time. You look at them, and Jacob van Rooyen is very young. He needs a foil. You look at the players they've trialled there. You've got Dan Turner. Bailey Fritsch is kind of that awkward size, but he's not really a key forward. They're really looking for it. They've tried Ben Brown. You can see they've tried to imprint that key learning into the side, and it hasn't quite worked. So you can see Harry McKay is a desperate, desperate need. So it makes sense for them. But let's look at Christian Petracca. When you look at the makeup of keys, you will find over the last 10 years, having two key forwards that kick over 40 goals is really inadequate. There's only one team that falls into that category, and that's Geelong. And when you look at how Geelong worked, they had one mid inside the top 20 of goal kicking, and every other side has had it. Collingwood had 4, Richmond had 1, Richmond had 2. It's a real common avenue. And what a goal kicking mid generally consists of is someone that has had over 20 possessions. He's averaging a decent amount of goals per game. He's averaging clearances about 4.5 more, and he's got some real good score involvements, about 8. Currently in the league, we have 5 players this year who have done that. They are Petracca, Bontempelli, Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, and Jason Horne-Francis. And when you look at that, that is a real keyhole of Cowan's list. Cowan's list has been almost barbaric when you look at goal-kicking mids. And it's never happened. And Cowan are actually one of the worst ranked teams versus positions for goal-kicking mids. Currently this year, you've got Patrick Cripps, who's played predominant midfield time on 16, doesn't rank inside the top 10 of goal-kicking mids. You've got players here in Cowan, when you go through the history of them, they have never really ranked inside there. Because if you actually go through Cowan's list makeup, over the last 10 years, you'd have to go all the way back to Mark Murphy when Cowan had, apart from the freak year that Cripps had, got 20 plus. So Cripps did 20 plus, but like last year, 11 goals from midfield was Matt Cottrell. 2022 was the year Cripps did it with 20, playing a little bit forward. 9 was the next best. Then you've got 13 from Cripps. Then you've got 13 from Noons. 2019, this is where it gets really bad. You've got 13 from Cripps. The Blues have really struggled to find that 20 consistent player. Now, why is that? Cripps genuinely will be imprint learning massively on the young boys. And Cripps' niche is more sliding forward and kicking goals as opposed to kicking goals from stoppage. So what I want to talk about here is the key makeup. Stoppage is the area of Carlton's dominance. And what happens when you have someone like Sydney's midfield makeup that can kick goals? Creates spread, right? What teams will know with Carlton is you play the extra defensively, that ghost we talked about with Ryan Burns, and you know that Carlton are going to get stoppage clearance, you know they're going to dominate, but you know the way they're going to finish off their work is kicking the ball deep inside to Harry and Charlie. You know very rarely are Carlton going to kick goals purely from stoppage. They have one of the most score launches from stoppage in the league. They don't have a natural goal kicker. So I want you to think about players like Lockie Neal last year when we played them, particularly when you saw Sydney players, 3 goals each for Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner, 2 each coming from stoppage situations. it changes the makeup of how you defend the stoppage, because suddenly that becomes a problem. Now, a lot of people say that's speed, gut running. This isn't the case. Marcus Bontempelli isn't incredibly quick. Petracca isn't considered incredibly quick. Their ability to penetrate from these stoppages are incredibly high. And this is the key position. Now, we look at replaceability of this. In the top 20, currently over the last 10 years, we've had 10 players considered pure goal-kicking mids, right? So let that sink in. There has been 106 players drafted in that time frame that potentially could be goal-kicking mids. You have a 10% chance of factoring them in, and 90% of the teams that have drafted them in have had one currently on their list. Carlton currently have 0. Potentially, there is an additional 4 players. So we've got to talk about potential. We did with the key forwards. There's potentially players there that can do it with the key forwards. Potentially, there's about 7 players that could become goal-kicking mids. 5 of which have got them on the list already. 1 of which hasn't. And Carlton haven't got one, potentially, that could go on there. They have a guy called Elijah Holland who could be. Problem is, half forward and small forwards are really incredible. So let's talk about how key forwards work. Geelong, when they had their 2 keys, one of them acted always as the dummy, and that's been Tom Hawkins, and that's been the fall-off of Tom Hawkins. He's not kicking the goals when Jeremy Cameron was there. He comes out and works deep. One of them works really deep in the goal square, one of them works out. If you watch how Harry and Charlie play, none of them work deep in the goal square. They all work out, which then makes it incredibly hard for small forwards to kick goals. You've got Mathew Cox at the moment, who's been one of the freaks of nature for the Blues, who's finally kicked over 30. This also comes into forward setup. Because Carlton are trying to bomb the ball long, it doesn't come in with any pace. It's a floaty one, which makes it hard. When you look at Geelong and teams that have high goal kicking from small forwards, it's because they've got that. And there's a reason that Tyson Stengel has dropped down the ladder this year and all their small forwards have dropped down, because the ball is coming more of a punt long to Jeremy Cameron or Tom Hawkins, and the others aren't quite getting involved. You want that deep entry and it being in and around goal. So for that to work, Carlton have got to really look at that. So what we know here, there is a 10% chance, roughly, of finding a goal-kicking mid in the draft. We know that all the top teams that have won a flag have it. And we know that it probably suits Carlton's agenda that the stoppage scores are all coming from Charlie and Harry. They're becoming score involvement as opposed to penetration through there, which creates a dynamic. So let's talk about that dynamic. What it does is, if you watch Carlton when they're in stoppage, they're trying to feed someone to get the ball in. Now, when you look at players like Nick Dacos, who are considered soft in the AFL world, they skirt the contest. The reason they skirt the contest is because they can break through and kick goals around outside 50, but also they can set players up 1 out. And this is why Collingwood last year, without the key forward, did it. They had 4 mids ranked inside that top echelon of goal-kicking mids. Statistically, it's more important to have goals from the midfield. It makes turnover defence harder. It makes it harder to structure, because at the moment when you play Carlton, you know, double team Charlie and Harry, you've got a good chance of making it way. Particularly around stoppage, teams have started to flood that, and Voss has reacted to it. So the synopsis of this video here is the trade plausible for both parties? And honestly, it's to my surprise, because I love Harry and Charlie, it makes sense to both parties for the first time ever. What are the objections with Christian Petracca? The injuries. Do I think the injuries are that bad in the terms of psychology for him? I don't really think they are. I really don't think they are. Broken rib, you've got a spleen, you have the internal bleeding. I think Petracca's a very strong boy. And also his game style hasn't really suited and been a myriad of being an incredibly strong in and under player. You look at his goals last year, 18 of them were handballs from Clayton Oliver in stoppage. We've got the best player in the league at handballing out to players in Patrick Cripps. You would say the makeup there, when you look at Carlton's midfield, and people always say is A grade. Let's just go with the 5 best midfielders that people talk about. Hewitt and Cripps, they're very similar types of players. Chera and Walsh, very similar types of players. And then you've got the extra Matt Kennedy or Cooper Lord. They're all very similar types of players. There is none of them in there that are goal-kicking mids. And you don't want to take Cripps away from feeding the ball out and becoming a goal-kicking mid, because traditionally he's not. A lot of them are set shots, which is the anomaly in them 20. He's ghosted as the third. That's a great option for the Blues, and they want to keep that. Petracca gets a lot of his goals straight from stoppage. So suddenly that makes Cowan a little bit more dynamic and very hard to defend. You can't just tag Cripps, because suddenly you're going to have to tag someone else. Walsh has become that very dancey outside player who delivers it into there. Suddenly when you've got Petracca bursting through there, that's freeing Walsh up as well to become that kind of Jackson McRae when they were really good, the Dogs. Getting the ball, churning the possessions, getting the midfield. The replaceability of Harry is interesting, because traditionally what you see with key forwards is two superstars don't work. We've got Jeremy Cameron and Hawkins. They had defined roles. Currently, Charlie and Harry, the defined role is moving Harry away from the goals and working up the wing, which doesn't help Cowan's goal scoring. When you see the top teams do it, a great example at the moment is probably how Waterman and Oscar Allen work, even though they're a bottom club side, or Darcy and Ugur Koken would be a good little example. One works the goal square, one works up the ground. So this could be an area here that Cowan could probably go in for someone like Tim Membry as a stopgap as they put time into Brodie Kemp, who looked like a very good foil, or Harry Levy, who is an incredibly good foil in VFL. It would be a shortfall, but genuinely, from a trade point of view, both of these sides would benefit, because I think that it probably affects Melbourne in the short term with the worry of Clayton Oliver's form. So, all in all, it's a real interesting one. Do I think it'll happen? No. Do I want it to happen? I don't know. I'd have to see it first. But this is a really interesting one. So, let me know what you think. How could Carlton find a goal-kicking mid? Could Carlton go for like a Luke Parker for a stopgap? Drafted a Christian Morales and hope that works, because he's been an incredibly goal-kicking mid in the shortfall. But Carlton have had a history of drafting goal-kicking mids and then that imprint learning happen. Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to have a discussion about it. Remember, be kind to each other. Peace, love and light. I'm out.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad.